At this central point where we're considering the more general characteristics of the need for therapy and what the therapy should look like, I think it's important to emphasize certain assumptions that I've been making about the whole process. One of the things is that it's about being clear about what generates the need for therapy in the first place. I'm reading a wonderful book that one of my clients has actually gifted me because he thought it was so wonderful. And it's talking about the nature of the trauma, the wounds, whatever it is that stresses an individual, particularly in the case of soldiers who have suffered PTSD and that sort of thing from battle. And there's no question that the books and the author's emphasis on what is traumatic and what is harmful to a person is entirely on the money. In other words, if one sees one's best friend shot dead right before one's eyes, or if someone precious to you is harmed or killed by what happens in the war, or if some part of you is maimed, that's a major wound, a major trauma, and something from which it is very difficult to recover. And that's all valid, and that's part of the difficulty that gets imposed on one that creates a need for therapy. There's no question about that. My only qualification of what I'm reading about in this wonderful book is the fact that it doesn't stress sufficiently what I think is the impact of the many small wounds that we suffer in childhood as children. And we're back now to my elephants in the nature preserve, in the game preserve. In other words, I think I will assert unequivocally that the concept of childhood that was essentially invented in the 19th century and thinks of it as a wee imperfect little being is a real loss for children because it radically underestimates what these little humans are able to pick up and what they do pick up in the course of their young lives. In other words, I think they're very intelligent to start with. I think they're very sensitive to start with. I think they're very imaginative to start with. I think they're very energetic to start with. I hope I'm making my point here. And it is absolutely harmful to the children if we underestimate that. Now, I tried to bring this topic up with a professional colleague of mine a while ago, and her reaction to what I was saying was, well, I don't believe in rushing kids. I don't believe in shoving them too hard forward. Well, you see, she's reacting sympathetically. She had a point. She was pro-child. But she was buying the underestimation of what children think and do. And therefore, what I was suggesting about their intelligence, their energy, and so on, was read by her as force-feeding them, as pushing too hard, as pushing them around. You see, and in fact, I was saying exactly the opposite, that if we don't assume about children what is true about their awareness, we are in fact inflicting a kind of wound on them by underestimating what they see, what they know, what they feel. So it's not just whether one receives the kind of wound, blow, that a soldier who's in battle and sees his friend killed that has an impact on the individuals involved, but many small things like constant criticism, like a harsh voice, like the destruction or deprivation of something that's very precious to the child and probably wouldn't even be noticed by the adult who's violating it, but the kid notices and will carry that feeling ever since. So my experience in doing therapy has been that every single client of mine, without exception, can, if called upon, if allowed to do so, conjure up the memories of many or some or multiple events, all of which inflicted a kind of pain on him or her. And that is never forgotten. That is carried in for the rest of our lives in our bodies, in our awareness, and is one of the most fundamental causes that lead to the need for therapy. Now, to be specific about it, what I'm talking about is what a human child, a human being, needs in the early years of life. He and she need to be seen as intelligent, need to be seen as sensitive, as feeling, as aware, as involved and connected with some aspect of their activity, whatever it is precious to the child. One of the things I like to say is that children never play. I think the word play is lethal when applied, because he's only playing. He's just playing. You see, he's not playing at all. They're practicing. The way I like to say it is, in those early years, children never play. They practice, you see. And what it looks like to us is it's not the adult reality. That doesn't mean it isn't a reality to the child. It doesn't mean the child isn't learning something about himself or herself in the process of doing this thing. So they need to be seen as physical, as having a body and wanting that respected. Hence the utter horror of striking or hitting a child. Absolutely not. It teaches nothing to the child except something bad. You see, physical integrity, the respect for the energy, the respect for the sexuality. All right, it may not be an explicit kind of adult sexuality, but they become aware of it. And as it's introduced, let it be sacred, let it be recognized, let it be accepted, you see. So there are specific things, the energy, the physical integrity, the intelligence, the sensitivity, the awareness, the sexuality, the imagination, the plans for the future. All of this is what a child is carrying with himself or herself constantly. And if there are wounds that are inflicted upon the child, i.e. the future need for therapy, it is on these areas that the wounds are inflicted. As a consequence, the way I read the need for therapy is essentially therapy would be something like the recovery from the gaps and holes that were inflicted on this human being, this human child, in the first 18 or 19 years of life, and what he is or she is carrying with himself ever after. So it's very important to see that the need for therapy, the pain that leads to therapy, is not something to be eschewed or to be driven away. It's not something to be condemned as problematic. And there's a real tendency for that. What it is the cry, the expression, the feel for, the need for, an affirmation of those things that were never affirmed, that were never recognized, that were never permitted, accepted, welcomed, justified, praised in the world. And so the need for therapy is invariably, in my view, the quest for something positive, for some part of oneself that has not been recognized, has not been allowed to flourish and have its role in the adult world. As a consequence, I think that the realm of feeling has a very important role to play. In other words, when I talk about the welcoming, when I talk about my clients who say, well, yeah, I would have used those very words for it, what I'm suggesting is that as a therapist, I feel the obligation to welcome my client in whatever state of feeling he or she presents himself, herself, so that the fundamental experience must be one of welcoming. It was very exciting for me recently when a new client said, wow, you can come anything to here. I yell, scream, fight, agree, yell, laugh, cry, I can do anything here. I said, I'm very excited. I'm glad you see that. I'm glad you feel that, you see, because that establishes a kind of groundwork, a kind of fundamental assumption of safety, of being able to proceed with whatever's needed that this individual now wants to do. It's the very opposite of the feeling that would have been generated in childhood. Some part of me is not welcome. Some part of me provokes anger. Some part of me provokes hostility. I better stay away from that. I better not do that, you see. Well, we start with the welcoming. Okay, anything you want to do. Recently, I had a client who said to me, I think you're pushing me around. I think you're telling me what to do. And I want you to shut up. And now you're going to throw me out of here. Because just the opposite. I'm ecstatic that you have welcomed yourself into this space and can do the thing that you've been trying to do for years and have never been allowing yourself to do. Now, what that means is it sets up a very complex but positive kind of framework for understanding what is being presented in therapy. In other words, it's being presented as a feeling. It's being presented as an experience. It's being presented as something that is troublesome. Absolutely understandable that that would be the case. And it, first of all, needs to be welcomed in whatever form it presents itself. But then, sooner or later, slowly or quickly, whatever is appropriate, whatever serves the purpose of the individual involved, what needs to be recognized is the content of what it is that's being presented. So very often, you know, an individual, a client will say, well, it troubles me, or it's a bad experience, or I'm angry, or I'm upset, or I want to shut up and flee, or whatever the reaction is, you see. And that's the starting place for this. There's no question about it. But sooner or later, what needs to be defined, and that means it's not just the feeling, but the heart of the feeling, what's going on for the whole human being in the feeling, you see. And it's, well, I didn't get any respect. My intelligence wasn't recognized. Well, my sexuality wasn't seen and praised. My energy was not supported and told could produce wonderful results for me. My imagination wasn't praised, and what I could imagine in the world was not. I want that, you see. An incident like that happened to me many years ago. I was pulling back in the subway entrance when the crowded car was about to be entered, and some wonderfully sensitive individual came galumphing into the car and stepped squarely on my foot. And I realized I was in a rage. And of course, he gave me a perfunctory apology. I said, I don't need you to be sorry. I need you to be careful. He looked at me like I was crazy, of course. But I got my rage. I'm angry. I'm upset here because I want my body to be respected, and I did not feel that my body was being respected when I was respectfully pulling back and allowing people to enter as best I could, and this guy just came in and stepped on my foot, regardless of what it is I was trying to do, and regardless of any respect that I might like to need. So here I am in a rage, here I am in anger, you see, and oh my goodness, angry. But the anger wanted the respect of my body. And my point is that any feeling and every feeling, sooner or later, can be understood to have that kind of content. What is it the individual wants with the experience that he's having? And that's true if it's a major feeling like those indicated in post-traumatic stress, yes, or the many small feelings that most of us live with in the course of our lifetimes, you see, and which embody these kinds of needs. So the feelings with which we react, my point is, invariably contain the content of some positive aspect of ourselves that we want to have online, we want to enjoy, we want to possess in our lives, and to some degree or other have not been permitted to realize, make real, express in our lives. Hence the need for therapy, and therefore effective talk therapy, in the sense that the individual who's experienced this not only learns that the feeling that he or she has is a valid one, but will see further that rather than expunge or drive away or drug out the feeling, that what's to be sought there is what is it that is being quested for? What is the positive aspect of myself that this feeling is calling for me to enjoy, to have? To whatever degree I have been denied that, to that degree I wish to have that. And therefore I am questing for it in my therapy work.